First and Second Samuel, our trusted prophet, Kings and Chronicles, he's sovereign.
Emily Perry, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs all the way from Philadelphia, USA. You run the C3 Church Watch account on Instagram as a way of informing the public about abuses within the C3 Church, a church that you were a part of for 3 years. So how are you doing, Emily? Your Instagram account certainly must keep you busy. Has this account started to draw some attention to your campaign?
Yeah, hi. It certainly has kept me busy. I started it a little over a year ago, like not even intending to really expose C3. It just, we'll get to that later. It's starting to pick up the attention of some journalists. I think the media is starting to get more interest in these sort of mega church abuse stories. It's been very interesting and educational.
Well, you grew up in Indiana, and right up until your mid-teens, you were part of a church-going family. And a lot of it centered around the biblical end times. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it was pretty heavily centered around those Left Behind books that were really popular in the 90s and early 2000s. I remember the church taking those books as the literal revelations almost. So yeah, it was intense. It was pretty abusive. I don't think that kids should really be exposed to that kind of theology. It caused a lot of mental health issues for me. So I just couldn't really deal with it. So I left on my own. I was the first one in my family to leave when I was 15.
Well, you left the church at age 15, and at age 20, moved to New York, where you got involved in a kind of self-help group that turned out to be more than a little cultish. So tell us about that.
Yeah, when I was 20, I started school. I had this really good opportunity with the acting conservatory. At the same time, like I mentioned, I was dealing with mental health issues from my church. I had an eating disorder primarily. I didn't know that I was suffering trauma, but I knew that I was depressed, and I didn't have any support or any money to go see a therapist. So I started going to these sort of 12-step meetings. And from there, I got recruited into a similar kind of thing, but it was very fundamentalist, very cultic. I describe it as, sort of an outpatient version of those teen treatment facilities. It was extremely intense. It was kind of like an offshoot of 12 Steps. It was started by some guy in California. He might have connections with Synanon, we're not too sure. But the movement is all over the country. There's a bit of it in the UK I know of. I was very, very heavily controlled to the point of people were telling me when I could work. I was told, you don't have an eating disorder. You actually have alcoholism. It's just showing up as, being addicted to starvation.
Strange.
And, I'm 20 years old and I don't know anything. So I'm okay, how do I get out of this? Out of, this disorder. I was really desperate to just feel better. So I was treated like an alcoholic instead of someone who needed treatment for trauma. It was very much like a we're gonna break you and then build you back up sort of thing, which was really unhealthy for me. Very controlling. I had to check in with my sponsor every single day, tell them everything about my day, even my thoughts, kind of thoughts I was having, who I was talking to. And it was just very psychologically, verbally abusive. And they were, telling me when I could work. They were controlling my finances that way, and, punishing me through this way. If I wasn't totally following my sponsor's direction, she would coerce me into not working, because she was like, your life's on the line, you need to focus on the program or you're going to die. And that would affect my income. And there were times when, like, I wouldn't have anything to eat, like, as someone who was dealing with an eating disorder. So it was very abusive.
After your time in this self-help group, you were looking for a new experience with the church, and that's when you discovered the C3 Church. So can you give us an overview of what this church is about, what their beliefs are, and what it was like for you in the initial months after joining?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe C3 in a nutshell is to just say that it's another Hillsong. Because like it's basically the same thing. Like it's even originating out of Sydney. The leaders are friends, like Brian Houston and Phil Pringle. They're really good friends. They feed off each other. It's, like a trendy, progressive looking church, but when you get deeper into it, you see that it's really conservative, evangelical, which I didn't even know it was evangelical. Like I definitely wasn't looking for that. I don't share those ideas at all, politically and morally, especially with everything that was going on at the time with Donald Trump. After about 2 years, like after leaving, the self-help group, getting trauma therapy, like in that 2 year space, I wasn't talking to anyone. There just came a time where I was like, I need to find some friends. And so yeah, I found C3 NYC through Instagram. That's C3's main marketing is through Instagram, and I was looking to have like a normal church experience, and it seemed like online that's what it was gonna be. It's like a lot of emphasis on community and people like who looked like they were really happy. Like I was ready to like I was an atheist, but I was ready to see like what I had missed growing up, like what I was supposed to have learned in the church. It was a lot of that, but mainly like looking for some friends with like a social structure, because I had a really time demanding job, working on call. So, church wasn't my first choice as like a social activity, but I couldn't really find anything else that matched my time needs, and just like being at a place and people are already there that I know every week.
Well, you were well in with the C3 Church and started going to events and conferences, but it was at one particular event that something happened that was to affect your entire relationship with your newly adopted church. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I was having like a really nice time. A month into being there, there was a women's conference that I went to, and it was like a weekend thing, like a 2-day event. And the second day, my sponsor showed up, and she was like threatening me. Like she came in through the door, and like I didn't even realize that she saw me, but like I saw her. She sat in a seat that someone picked for her because she was late. When people were in a moment of prayer, like I was like totally fixated on her. I wasn't like closing my eyes or anything. I just wanted to know like where she was gonna go after prayer, because there was a break.
This was the lady from your previous self-help group, is that right?
Yeah.
So she turned up there.
We were in prayer and I was keeping an eye on her, and then she turned around and was like looking like she wanted to like gun it towards me. And so I ran out of the building, and I didn't know what to do, and like I was like in a total panic. And I ended up through like Instagram chat letting the lead female pastor know later on at night, like she responded like, "Oh my God, this is terrible. Let's meet up." Like we never did. And like I was asking her, like, well, what's a good time for you? Like, here's my schedule. And it was just like, I heard absolutely nothing for like a few weeks. And like people, like the pastors were like, come to church, like you're safe, like it's not a big deal. And I'm like, well, what if this person comes back? Can you help me? Like this person, like I don't feel safe, and I feel like I am afraid like this person's going to attack me. And I was asking for some kind of like a domestic violence protocol, and they were like, yeah, we'll do that. they just kept not doing it. So I was, informing my therapist about all this and just like how much this was upsetting me and like stirring up my trauma symptoms. And she's like, this doesn't feel safe, and maybe you should think about leaving. And I told the male lead pastor this. He blew up at me. It was like, this isn't our fault. You're bothering us with messaging us, asking for a meeting. Another pastor told me that I was asking too much time for the lead pastors for someone who is new. I started getting like really shamed for the experience that I had.
So much for a loving church there, huh? Yeah. Well, the threats made on you by your former self-help leader caused you a great deal of anguish and even PTSD. All you had was the associate pastor of the C3 church to turn to, but they really weren't much help, were they?
No, it was actually the lead pastor who referred me to one of the associate pastors. She called me one day, like several months into this, and she was like, we're gonna work together over the summer, and saying like, you need to build back trust with us. And I felt like I was, getting blamed for the fact that they were ignoring a domestic violence situation, trying to make me the problem. This associate pastor called me. She's actually the operations manager for C3 NYC. And like really these churches, they use the term pastor very loosely. Again, that was something that I wasn't aware of. And she was like, I want to help you. And like, but at the same time, trying to blame me for being upset over a situation like where I was told that there would be help. Yeah, she wanted to spend like a summer with me. Where she wanted me to go with her to these things called dinner parties, which is basically like a midweek Bible study. Instead of like my own group, she wanted me to follow her to a bunch of different groups every week. And like I didn't really want to do that. And I was supposed to link up with her and about Bible study. And I'm like, what does this have to do with my situation? It seemed like they wanted me to just like stop talking about my need for safety. And they were really focused on me seeing the lead pastors as these wonderful people who were faultless, making sure that I was saying that, whatever conflict or disagreement that I had was my fault. There's a lot of gaslighting, and just like a lot of being torn down, just like emotionally and psychologically. And I felt like something was really wrong. Like I didn't understand what was going on. I thought that, this had to be some kind of misunderstanding. I just kind of felt like the work that I had done on myself, like the past several years, was starting to spiral. I saw red flags, but I was like, I don't know if this is real or not. Because, while they were tearing me down, they were still like, we love you, we want to help you. And they just like kept blaming me. And I didn't really have anyone to say, this is wrong. I didn't have anyone to back me up. Like, it got to a point where I was sort of being manipulated by a few different people. And it just got to the point where I wanted to take my life. And I was also suffering like nerve issues due to like the trauma symptoms. Like, I was having some trouble some days, like even walking, which isn't good in New York City. Like, I was asking the church to like, please just like stop doing this. Like, I don't want to work with you anymore. I just want to be a normal member. They took me off volunteering, and they were gaslighting me about, the process of being able to sign up. They were tearing down my character, telling me I was demanding and entitled. The lead female pastor said that if I just forgave her, then I wouldn't have, PTSD anymore. I was like very consistently like trying to get out of this relationship with this pastor, telling the lead pastor and my location pastor what was going on. I was totally ignored, like each time that I did that. And at one point, my pastor made this rule, like this staff rule, that the only person that I could talk to was her on staff. Like, everyone just ignored me. Like, team leaders were told to watch out for me. Like, she was going around the church calling me crazy, really sick. I felt very trapped in my situation.
Seeking a new change, yet again, you turn to a new C3 church in Philadelphia, communicating online with them because of COVID lockdowns, while the church waited to reopen. But it wasn't long before those from the New York branch began to make their opinions known. Isn't that right?
The Philadelphia location was a new location that was opening up, and I kind of saw like a way out of my situation. Like, I just wanted to go to a service, be part of something that was just like without the drama. I didn't want to be judged anymore the way that I was being judged. And I reached out to the lead pastor for the Philadelphia location, like while he was still in the UK, like sorting out his visa, waiting for it. Connected with him for like 5 months, was helping him out. There was no issues. And then, there was a meeting with C3 NYC. Like, I didn't know at the time that my church was sponsoring their visa. So there was like talk of like who was going to be part of the initial team. And, my name came up. My pastor got really angry. She didn't know that I was talking to this pastor. And she said that because I wasn't aware of this relationship, like, Emily, she's manipulating you. Like, right after that, I got blocked on Instagram by the Philadelphia pastors. No discussion. And like, I tried to explain the situation to them. I was like, trying to have the meeting with them to explain like this is all like a really, really blown out of proportion misunderstanding, but that, they basically just shunned me. Like, they never met me. They only knew me like in a very basic way, like me sending over, information about Philadelphia, like things to do, information on flights within America, like I was still, you know, trying to fix things, and I found out like pretty recently actually that they had started slandering me to their team. I found this out through people who were there. This sort of continued on until June of last year, when I was just like pretty much at my wit's end with this pastor, and with, you know, the situation with Philadelphia. And I had I because of like the response that the pastors for Philadelphia, because like the response just didn't make sense, and I'm like again, like something isn't right. And I started researching their church in the UK, Hope City Church, and it turned out that there's like horrible scandals going on there, and you know, it was being considered a cult. I pretty much was like at my wit's end, and with like just trying to get away from this pastor. And so I created an account that I didn't think anyone would see called C3 Church Watch.
Well, it was a year ago that you decided to begin the C3 Church Watch account to expose the abuses and injustices you witnessed within the C3 Church. Not long after that, one of the New York pastors demanded that you take it down. So what happened after that?
I had this account up that I didn't think anyone would see. I was like, you know, stop messing with me. Like I know things that, you know, you think that I don't know. Was basically like what I put up, you know, like with the articles about Hope City Church. You know, I was like, no one's gonna see this. Like I don't know like very much about Instagram, to be honest. I still thought that this situation was just about me. Like I still was like, you know, maybe this is my fault. I hadn't heard of like anyone else having a problem, and I was specifically told like no one else has a problem with this church except you. But then I started receiving stories from other people like all over the world, and including my location. The first person who followed me was from one of the Hope City investigations, someone who was interviewed, and that made it like a lot more real for me. Like,
yeah,
like this girl wants to say something, like what's going on? Like it doesn't seem like whatever, like what happened was resolved if she's following me. And it just kind of like exploded from there. People were DMing me like, oh my God, thank you for someone's finally doing this. And I'm like, doing what? You know? And like at the same time, there was this huge like deconstruction movement like just beginning on Instagram, and people like calling out church abuse, which I had no idea about. But these people, like, they picked me up pretty quick, and like they thought like, yeah, you're gonna be part of this with us. And I'm like, what? Like, what's going on? And like it was intense, you know, just like it was really validating too, just to see like this huge problem that's everywhere within these organizations, and just learning about what happened to me. And when I started to share my story, the lead pastors of my church, they kind of panicked, and they started calling up leaders, telling them, like warning them about my account and saying like everything on it is a lie. They would start bringing in people who were following me for meetings as kind of like a threat. And like my pastor kept telling me like, let's talk, you know, like take the account down and we'll talk. And I just kept saying no. Like I just totally had it. And I caught her in like several lies at that point, and I was just like, oh my God, how many times have you done this to me? And you know, this went on for several months until November, when I was eventually sent by this like really abusive pastor that had been working with me, a cease and desist letter, saying, we want you to take down your account. It was co-signed by C3 Philly, and they were like, we're gonna pursue to like the fullest extent of the law if you don't take this account down. And then like one of my followers was like, this is not okay. And he had a friend who was a really popular journalist, got him involved. He started snooping around, like calling C3 NYC, and like it kind of freaked them out. And they very quickly said, we never had any intention of taking Emily to court. And that's the last that I ever heard from them.
Scared them off, huh?
Yeah.
Emily, you've had a while to think over your time within the C3 Church, and I'm sure that you pinpointed several problems within the organization that you would like to warn people about. So what would you say right now to anyone who might be considering joining this church?
I think one of the biggest issues is how vague a lot of these locations are with LGBTQ, with their affirmation. Like, they're not going to say it, so like we're saying it that this is a really homophobic organization, and if you make it all the way to like a leadership position, like they'll kick you out if they find out that you're anywhere on the queer spectrum. Like, they have really awful beliefs about LGBTQ that, I never knew about. There's a mental health aspect that's very dangerous. These are people who are loosely calling themselves pastors. They don't have any qualifications to be working in a pastoral care capacity with people who are dealing with like really serious issues. A main part of that is, the mental health aspect, just thinking like they can heal people with prayer and like meeting them for coffee and doing things called sozo sessions, which came out of Bethel Church. And I think anything that comes out of Bethel Church is just like, that's an instant red flag. They think that they're qualified to heal illnesses because they have God's authority, just because like they're Christians. Like, if people can go to my account and see my pastor like literally saying this. There was a situation in Australia, which it might be why he got sent to New York, where the lead pastor was trying to heal someone with schizophrenia. He was doing exorcisms on her that she didn't want, like locking her in a room. And she ended up this past winter committing suicide because she had so much religious trauma that she couldn't resolve from that situation. There's like a lot of like a controlling feature in this church. I've had DMs from people like all over the world. They're mentioning gaslighting, or they're describing it. So I think it's just like a huge feature in this church. Manipulation is really bad. It's one of the main complaints come out of C3, just like in the media as well. Just, pastors profiting off of financial manipulation. It's a prosperity gospel kind of church. But it's not, it's not like this really overt way that you see with televangelist, saying, give me money for this jet, it's more subtle, and it's about, connecting finances with your relationship to God. Like, if you give money to the church, like how much money you give is a symbol of like how how well your relationship is with God, how much you want to commit to Him. There's love offerings on top of that, and vision builders on top of that, like all these different ways that you have to, like, they want you to give money. And it's weird how all these pastors are becoming really wealthy. Like, they take these luxury vacations, they have really nice homes, a lot of them have second homes. The founder, Phil Pringle, I would just say that, like, Phil Pringle is a multi-millionaire in Sydney, Australia. Some kind of like $3 million house or something, I don't know, right on the ocean. Like, these pastors are like sort of always going on vacation and traveling the world, with their messages, but also, taking time off to like hang out in Australia or Bali or whatever. It just kind of feels like this is a system that's benefiting them and not really anyone else.
Well, it's been quite a journey that you've been on, Emily, and I'm very glad you've been able to come on the other side and speak out about this group. I will leave links to your Instagram account, C3 Churchwatch, as well as other relevant links in the description below. And all the stuff to say is thank you once again for coming on to Talk Beliefs.
Thanks for having me.